fundamental question. Do we see our salvation as being with all of creation? Or do we see our salvation as being from all of creation? And as you're probably well aware, Christianity in the Western world has a very mixed record on this question. And that would be a very interesting topic to spend a lot of time unpacking. But indeed, there's been plenty of theology and plenty of practice. And even if you look at many of our prayers and songs and all of those today, they do tend to orient us away from this place and to sort of split earth from heaven and matter from spirit. I love this quote from Richard Rohr. Some of you know his work, a Franciscan. His most recent book was called The Universal Christ. He says, what most religion treats as separate, matter and spirit, humanity and divinity, has never been separate from its beginnings. Spirit is forever captured in matter, and matter is the place where spirit shows itself. It is one sacred world. Jesus is the union of human and divine in space and time, whereas the Christ is the eternal union of matter and spirit from the beginning of time. If authentic God experience overcomes the primary false split between ourselves and the divine, then it should also overcome the equally false split between ourselves and the rest of creation. And, throughout the biblical tradition, which is many things, of course, there are many different lines of thought present in the Bible, including those that, place the divine largely outside of this earthly realm and intervening from time to time. But the wisdom tradition, the wisdom literature, which represents a fairly significant portion of our scriptural tradition, does see a union of this place of earth and of spirit. A psalm that I love that really typifies this is Psalm 104. All creatures depend on you to feed them throughout the year. You provide the food they eat. With generous hand, you satisfy their hunger. You turn your face away and they suffer. You stop their breath, they die and return to dust. You give breath, fresh life begins. You keep renewing the world. And breath is that, the Hebrew word that some of you may know, nephesh, connects us most intimately with all life. All living things breathe. And we have this great mutuality, this great interdependence with all life, which is a physical reality, and the psalmist captured that and furthermore articulates that all that is, all that lives in the divine. Gregory of Nyssa in the 4th century said, when one considers the universe, can anyone be so simple-minded as not to believe that the divine is present in everything, pervading, embracing, and penetrating it? And that line of thought, was very characteristic of Eastern Christianity, and showed up in the West and in our history and is still present today, but often neglected with this sort of dualistic separation of spirit and matter, heaven and earth. And to me, that's tragic, and it's ironic because Christianity is the religion of incarnation, of the divine being born into all matter, all being. As Teilhard de Chardin says, over every living thing which is to spring up, to grow, to flower, to ripen during this day, say again the words, this is my body. In our tradition, of course, our Eucharistic ritual, our celebration of Eucharist is a meal, which is an intimate coming together of people, of course, but it's bread and wine, fruits of the earth, product of soil and sun and rain, laid on an altar made of wood from a tree, an altar covered with linen from flax that grows in the field, candles made from beeswax, all consecrated by a priest and a gathered community affirming that God is present in all these elements, that it is in and through the world of matter that we come to know the divine. And I'll just leave you with a quote from Sally McFaig, who some of you may have known through her work at VST, in a book she called The Body of God. What if we accepted the claims that the Word is made flesh and dwells with us, that the natural world is sacred, that the planet is a living organism that is our home and our source of nurture? What if we dared to think of our planet, and indeed the entire universe, as the body of God? And this was the icon that I was showing off earlier, this beautiful painting by Robert Lentz, which has the Christ figure holding the world inside the cosmic egg. And again, capturing that sense of no separation, that this is a holy place, that all that is held in the embrace of the divine. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Ron. And now I'll turn the floor over to Coyote.
Good evening, brothers, sisters, fellow human beings and spirits wandering around your homes. And Jawa and Squesh Shinkiap, Ashmua, Ashukshuk, Tlikumchin, and Tlikupmuk Nation. Living now on unceded territory, Sechelt Nation. I'm from Lytton First Nation originally, and today's International Language, First Nation Language Day. I introduced myself as Coyote from Lytton, and I loved your 9-year-old story. That was a good one. I got an even better one now. I grew up with my grandparents, 14-mile on a ranch, dirt road, horse-drawn, buggy, wagon, on a dirt road from 0 to 6 years old. So I remember riding on the back of a buggy, horse-drawn buggy. I remember running around the hay fields, the massive gardens that my grandparents and uncles and aunties looked after, and playing. Like there was no concern, where's the grandkids? Because we're always in view, and if not, they had a hunch where it would be, and playing along the ditch lines or helping to move the water, shift the water and move it to another part of the garden, or playing in the trees, or chasing the chickens, just really enjoying the outdoors. And to the point, we had a lot of animals, chickens and horses and cows, and at 14 Mile. And my grandmother was crying, like she didn't want us inside the house. And so she put us out on the deck, and 2 horses came over to make sure we didn't leave the deck. And every time we tried to go in one way, the horse would move that way, and not realizing that my grandfather had died in the house, and my grandmother was grieving, wanted to be alone with the grandpa. And so that memory kept popping up on my journey, and I finally asked one of my aunties, what was that about? And she goes, oh, your grandfather died. That's why your grandmother put you out on the deck, just to get away from the grief. But we couldn't go in there because his horses wouldn't let us. So I guess that was a blessing, really. And that was, I think, when I was 6. I get to my other grandparents' house south of Lytton, Kanaka Bar Reserve, and it's a 3-bedroom, and 16 of us living in that house. But the mountainside we had a beautiful garden up in a mountaintop, and my grandparents, both sides had beautiful, beautiful gardens. And so we had food. When I turned 8, my grandfather came and picked me up from St. George's Residential School. And he goes, I'm going to take you up the mountain. So when we get home, pack a set of clothes and we'll go up in the mountain, and there's something, got to get up there, and 7 miles in the mountains. And so, and he didn't take anybody else. And I was wondering, what is this about? But we walked the 7 miles, got into a camp called Cedar Camp, and there was already a lean-to that was already built, and he got a fire going, and he goes, grandson, keep this fire burning until I come back. And he left. Like, this is 7 miles in the mountains, 8-year-old boy looking after a fire, and I paid attention. And so I watched the fire, I watched deer go by, mice running around. I could hear a creek nearby. So if I got thirsty, I'd just go get a drink. And then the first day goes by and nothing. He doesn't come back. And so I keep the fire burning. And the bear comes walking by, and I stoke that fire a little bit more. And, I'm watching that bear, and he's looking at me sideways and, just doing his thing. The berries up there were humongous. I mean, tons of huckleberries and Saskatoon berries and soapstone berries and salmon berries. So there was a lot of food there. And that was one thing I didn't notice right away, is that I didn't have any food to eat. So for the days that I was up there, all I had to do was keep the fire burning. So second night goes by, I'm drifting off, and oh yeah, I got to keep the fire burning, implanted in my brain. And so kept the fire burning. Day 3 shows up, no grandfather. I'm starting to think, okay, what's going on? What's happening? And then that deer goes walking by again, and I throw some more wood on the fire. And so I paid my due diligence to that fire. I just really, got mesmerized by the flames and how the different colors, way the flames dance around. And, it's just really, for me, it was a warmth, because the nighttime was on the mountaintops really cold. So day 3 is done, no grandfather. Fourth morning, wake up, and the fire was just about out, because I nodded off, and oh yeah. So I stoked the fire back up, and around noon he shows up, and he goes, okay, we can go now. And so we put the fire out, and he goes, I want you to help me pack half a deer or half a goat home, because that's what he went and did. He went and got meat for our families. And he said, your uncles are going to show up and help out anyway. I just wanted to let you know what we're doing. 30-some years later, I get a call from Sitka Indian Band, the chief. He goes, Coyote, we need you up the mountain here. Loggers are trying to get into our watershed. And there's the medicine man. He goes, I really want you there, Coyote. There's something tugging at from this mountaintop, tugging to bring you back. And I'm looking at him, okay. So we get there, and we, sure enough, my great aunties and all my cousins, and we stood arm in arm across that road to stop the loggers from going up the watershed. And actually, one guy came barreling right towards us, but we stopped him, and literally inches away from it, my great auntie and myself, and his boss was watching. He said, "You're fired, get away from here now." And so that's one logger down. And then the medicine man goes, "We need to build a sweat lodge on top of the mountain. There's something that's saying we got to do this." And so we built a lodge, and everybody that was at that campsite down at the bottom all came up, and there's 33 of us inside that sweat. And the medicine man goes, "I want you to sit beside me. There's something here he goes, it's magic." He goes, "You'll see." So the first round we initiated the lodge, because a brand new lodge, you have to initiate it and just make it simple. And second round, open the door and bring more rocks in. He goes, "This is a round. I want you to feel, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel the magic from Mother Earth here." I said, "Okay." So he brings in, lava rocks that are that big and they're glowing red, and you can almost see through them. And so he gets it loaded in and closes the door and starts splashing. And everybody's starting to gasp for air. And I couldn't feel nothing. Even while he was splashing, I put my hand right over the lava rocks and I couldn't feel nothing. And he sensed that, and he goes, "That's what I wanted you to feel. Sometimes Creator shows us gifts from the land." And I just wanted to share that with you, that any gift that comes from Mother Earth is a gift that we receive openly. And he goes, "Oh yeah, and by the way," he goes, "when you get out before the next round, I want you to call your 8-year-old self back to you." And the elder that was there, my great auntie, she goes, "That's Cedar Camp." And I remember, yeah, Cedar Camp, that's where it was. And he goes, "Call your spirit back. That little 8-year-old boy was still waiting on that mountaintop for you to come back." And so I get out, bawl my eyes out, and "Terry, come back, time to go, time to complete our journey." So 30 some years later, I could feel the shift in energy just from that experience, and many like that. But that one was, I'd say, the icing on the cake and the cherry on top of that. And so Mother Earth speaks to us in many different ways. And for me, it's always been through energy coming from Mother Earth, songs coming to me through Mother Earth, or songs coming to me from the animals or the elements. And I have so many that I want to share with you. And I know we're limited here. So that was one of the main ones that I wanted to share with you, that there's magic on land. And I love it. I'm glad that I get to witness good things now instead of through the bottle and dope and all of that. Now I have good vision and really paying close attention to my surroundings. Today, I was watching a baby eagle trying to catch ducks on our beautiful little pond that we have here. There's beavers on there, but this eagle was going after the ducks, circling around. And I was like, what a good way to spend a day in the sunshine and watching the eagles play. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Coyote. Sorry, I will say that again. Thank you so much for that. Sorry, I've been told that my computer is having some troubles with the sound, so I hope everyone can see me, can hear me. There's been no complaints about seeing me. I've actually been asked to shut off my camera. I will now pass things over to Laurel. Thank you, Laura.
Hi, thank you. Coming from the Catesy and Kwantlen First Nations down here in Maple Ridge. And I'd like to talk to you about how I understand the environment and the wisdom in the tradition that I grew up in, and in the practice that I have as a fine woodworker. So I'd like to share my screen because I have some images that I think will help you to see how I see. My sense of creation is very much wrapped around trees. I see the hand of the Creator in the gift of trees, and not just trees as they are or as they have become, but as they can become again. The environment gives and gives and gives, and the planet always has more to give, and it's our responsibility to receive, not to grab, but to receive and to value what we have. When trees are labeled as old growth, they're very valuable. And the reason people want at these old growth forests is that the older a tree gets, the stronger the wood, and the longer and the straighter the grain, and much more stable. But here's the thing. We already have so much of this wood with long, straight, strong, dry grain available, but we don't use it. We cut a tree down and then we use it once and then we're done with it. But there's a huge resource still for us to use. Those trees, now lumber, still want to keep giving. It takes 11 to 13 times more energy to cut down a tree, transport it, and process it into lumber that we can build things with. 11 to 13 times more energy than it does to reclaim and reuse wood. The US Department of Agriculture estimates that if we took all the reclaimable wood and put it to use, we would have over 1 billion board feet of reusable wood. I have a friend named Gary who's a wood turner, and he collects wood from all kinds of different places because he just hates to see good wood go unused. Trees do so much to capture carbon in our atmosphere, and they draw it into themselves, and then when we cut the tree down, they're still holding that carbon. When we use it to make lumber, to make things, it's still there. But when we stop using it and we send it to a landfill, we burn it, we release all that carbon back up into the atmosphere. Releasing carbon from trees, from wood that's still ready to be something else. Like my friend Gary, I also dislike seeing good wood go to waste. And I came across a parish that was getting rid of their pulpit. It's beautiful wood. It's red oak. And it was destined for the street curb, for the town to pick up and send off to a landfill. But my theology is grounded in redemption. There's always a way to live again, to grow again, to serve again. When I was ordained a priest, my bishop shared a prayer with all of us that I've included on this slide, recognizing that things which were old are now being made new. Things that have been cast aside still have a purpose, still have value, and still have meaning for the world. The theology and the wisdom of the hand of God seen in trees, for me, it begins in the beginning of the Hebrew scriptures, our ancient texts, where we find that all of creation is a garden. And in the very center of the garden are trees. One tree we all kind of know about, it's fairly popular. It's the tree with the forbidden fruit. And people ate of it, and they were driven out of Eden. But we don't hear very much about that other tree. It goes a long time in the story of the scriptures of the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition, and the scriptures that we have in the New Testament end at some point in the far distant future, in a new place where things have been restored, have been redeemed, and have been given a new purpose and a new life. And it's in the very end of the scripture record that we have that the whole thing comes full circle. Because at the very end, that tree that was closed off to us in the Garden of Eden comes back again. And once again, at the very center of creation, there's a garden. And in the very center of the garden is the same tree of life. The very hand of God, of the Creator, is with us. And I see it playing out in how we relate to the resources that this planet has already given us and continues to give us. So on Sunday mornings, I serve at an altar as a priest, and I talk about communion with God, that special sacramental, deep divine connection that we have with the Creator. And then the rest of the week, I work at a different altar, the altar of my workbench, where I feel the hand of the Creator right next to me. And we meet at that altar and continue to create. And when I work with wood and with trees, and I take something old and I make it new, when I find purpose and beauty and service from something old and I give it a new life, I feel God's joy. And so that kind of wisdom gives me joy, gives me a sense of purpose. And it's a deep connection that I hope to put into the work that I do when I share it with others. Thank you so much for letting me be part of this presentation, to be amongst this esteemed panel. Thank you for letting me into your homes and your Zoom and your TV screens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurel. That was beautiful. And you reminded me of Wade Compton, one of the sort of Vancouver's greatest poets, has in recent years also been working with resalvaged wood and doing this. You know, that it's just such a powerful image, and what you evoked was just made me think of him, made me think of his work, and yeah, the real beauty and redemption in that. So thank you. I will now turn things over to Abe. Abe, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be sharing the stage with the wisdom, the immense wisdom of everyone else here. My name is Abe. I'm from Surrey, BC. I'm currently a student at the University of Toronto. And so I joined this call from the territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And it's around 10:47 p.m., but this is the perfect time for me as a student because my night is just getting started. So it's wonderful to be here with everyone. I'd like to start by telling you a bit about myself and my story. My name is Abhijit Singh Sechelt, and every aspect of my name is important to my identity and my understanding not only of myself and the world, but the environment. And as we break it down throughout my next 5 minutes or so, and as I talk about myself, I hope you can draw links to your own life and your own connections and your own place, because place and land and identity are all connected for all of us. And as we draw those links, I think it's critical to start with yourself. My family comes from a place in India called Punjab. And so Punjab really translates to 5 rivers. So Punjab means 5 rivers. Pun means 5, Jab means rivers. Very simple. And I was born in India, but I was 11 months old when my family and I moved to Surrey, BC. And so Surrey really being my main home, I have connections to India and Punjab in particular. And one of the biggest connections that I've learned about as I've learned about my family history and my history of the people from the Punjab is the connection to land. And it really comes from farming. Punjab with 5 rivers, you can imagine, is a large producer of agriculture. And that connection to land through farming really allows people to be engaged with the land in multiple different ways. And so as I think of those connections to land, I also think of the stories of conflict that have happened over land. My grandfather at the age of 20 both of his parents were killed and 2 of his siblings were killed in the 1947 partition of India and Pakistan, as his family and my family really had to go from the side of Pakistan to India, fleeing from violence and leaving everything that they had in the process. That too is a part of my story, that conflict coming from migration. And as we think of migration, climate change, the issues that we face in the world today, it's very easy to recognize that they're all connected. And so I'd like to speak from a few perspectives of wisdom today, as a young person who's been working in climate action and climate activism, but also as a practicing Sikh. My wisdom from the Sikh faith informs a lot in terms of what I do for climate action, but also the ways in which I live my life. And so I'd like to begin with the idea of the Sikh concept of oneness. Now, in Sikhism, God is seen as the universe. God is the eternal oneness that encompasses all. So God and the universe are not seen as separate. So every time you hear the word God, you might be able to replace that with universe and you'd be totally okay. And so the idea of oneness is that there is no other. There is no other person out there. There is no one to hate. There is no one to fear. And the idea of oneness is that the land, the environment, but other people are inextricably connected to yourself. And as we experience this shared existence, there is nothing different between you and someone else. And recognizing that connection is something that's allowed me to really engage in my journey. And so as I think of my own wisdom that comes from my family's land, that comes from my faith that I've grown up in, as a first-generation Canadian, I've wanted to draw links to my own land, my new land that I call home. And so growing up, I really remember going on morning walks in the beautiful British Columbian air. The perfect days when it's like slightly moist, but it's also warm enough that you only need a slight rain jacket. My dad and I would go for morning walks at like 6 a.m., a big contrast from what I'm doing right now. And we'd go on these beautiful morning walks, and I felt so connected to the land, to the environment, but to the people around me. And I remember forming that strong connection to environment. Fast forward to 2016, at the age of 14, I had this incredible opportunity to travel to the Arctic. I had this opportunity to go on this expedition with 200 people from around the world. So these were scientists, historians, musicians, but also students from all around the world. And I traveled to the Canadian Arctic to see the impacts of climate change firsthand. On this expedition, I remember the first day we were sailing down Frobisher Bay off the coast of Iqaluit, and we saw 9 polar bears. It was incredible. I saw icebergs right in front of me. I saw everything to do with the environment, and it was absolutely incredible. Again, I felt connected, and I felt like it felt so familiar to see everything that was in front of me. And I remember seeing the impacts of climate change firsthand in front of me, from the glaciers melting right in front of my eyes. There was this one moment at the Ilulissat ice fjord in Greenland. So this is a place where you could see ice stretched out for kilometers and kilometers, as far as the eye can see. And as you think of this place, it looks like there's not even any water. It looks like it's just mountains of ice. And all 200 people on this expedition, so again, we're talking about people from all over the world, from all different backgrounds, all different disciplines of study. And all 200 of us went silent for a moment. And as we went silent, we could literally hear the icebergs melting. So it was millions of drops of the purest water on the planet going into the freshest body of water that exists. And at the age of 14, I heard that with my own ears. And in the moment, I felt inundated with emotion, like the burden of climate change was on my shoulders and I had nothing I could do about it. But instantly, I talked to my Inuit peers, my friends whose homes were the Arctic, and they talked about how they've been experiencing the impacts of climate change for the past 20, for the past 30 years. It was not a new thing for them. And I drew inspiration from the ways in which they were learning about the environment and the ways in which their tradition was focused on seeing the environment as a part of themselves, not something that was separate. And so returning from this expedition, two things really happened for me. I decided to investigate, again, my own spiritual wisdom and how that applied to the issue of climate change. But I also realized that that process of building empathy, connecting with people from different walks of life, but learning about those personal experiences was extremely powerful. And I realized that by connecting on the basis of empathy and having young people connect with each other, we could actually engage in better learnings about climate change. And so my older brother and I, we started a nonprofit called Break the Divide. And the idea was incredibly simple. We would connect communities across Canada with each other to break down divisions, talk about climate change, talk about the local impacts of climate change, and see if anything came out of that. And so we connected a school in Inuvik in the Northwest Territories with my high school in Delta, BC. And we just had youth talking to each other. And so it started at a very surface level. Students at my high school talking about what students in the North did for fun. We talked about what shows we like to watch, what things we like to do on the weekend. We talked about what home meant to us. And very quickly, we started talking about the issues of our home communities. And so youth in the North started talking about how climate change was actually causing permafrost to melt unevenly. And as a result of that, pipes beneath the surface were breaking. And so very quickly, again, for us in BC, climate change turned from an abstract issue to a very tangible issue that was impacting real people. And likewise, we talked about the impacts of heat waves, of flooding, of smoke from wildfires in our communities. And we realized that by talking to one another about our individual experiences, we were fostering empathy and we could understand one another. Long story short, with Break the Divide, we've been able to expand this youth movement to break down divisions and talk about climate change, going from a place of apathy or anxiety about the climate crisis to a state of empathy, and transforming that state of empathy to places of action and active hope. Doing so has involved collaborating with youth from all over the world. And as we've expanded our work, we recognize the immense importance of empathy, but also listening to youth voices. Because as young people talk about climate change, there are very real emotions that come up. I think all of us in this shared space here today can recognize that climate change and the threat of climate change makes us feel a certain way. For a lot of young people, there's a lot of anxiety that comes up because of climate change. A lot of young people wonder what our futures will look like, whether we'll be safe. There's often a lot of grief for what's been lost. Ecological grief is a term that refers to the things that have been lost from the past. Solastalgia is a term that refers to the homesickness that you may experience while still physically in your home location, but it's as if you don't recognize the environment. I think of BC over the summer of 2021, when it felt like every day was burning hot, and it didn't feel like that home that I grew up in, going on those early morning walks with the moist air and the 10-degree weather. And so as we think of the changes that are brought up by climate change, I think it's critical to think of our own perspectives and connect to the land, connect to who we are, and connect to our ecological identities, connecting to our stories with the land and environment. And so for me, although I may live in Surrey, BC, and now Toronto, Ontario, my ecological identity stems beyond that. It stems to my family and my family lineage and my family heritage, and the connection to farming in an area that is experiencing environmental injustice today as the 5 rivers of Punjab dry up. And as I think of that, I feel an immense connection to that land. And I feel like that connection drives me to want to take action in my land today. The land that I call home today, and the land that I must now be a steward of. Not only am I acting out of despair, but out of a responsibility and an obligation to do better. So I'd like to leave everyone with a few key pieces of wisdom that I've learned from the Sikh tradition and from other young people, especially as it comes to the mental health and the emotions that come from the climate crisis. Firstly, when it comes to young people and wisdom, we often recognize that young people have youthful perspectives and new ideas to bring to the table. But wisdom comes in many forms, and without thinking of solely the novelty that young people bring, we can also recognize the wisdom that might be timeless from young people. And an example of that that was actually very inspirational to me at a young age was the story of the seventh guru of the Sikh faith. So the gurus were the main prophets, the teachers of Sikhism. They were our embodiments of God and the teachings of God on earth. And so in around the 16th or 7th century, the seventh guru was actually a 5-year-old boy. The guruship was given from the 6th guru to a 5-year-old boy. And many people questioned at that time, what sort of wisdom a 5-year-old boy could have. You know, a 5-year-old boy, if we think of ourselves at 5 years old, we can wonder, you know, what sorts of wisdom would I have? But the Guru Har Krishan Ji at 5 years old went to communities and taught people about the importance of environmental stewardship, of connection to land. And the Guru actually came up with a very important lesson of reminding people that the connection to land and connection to others around them stems from this place of oneness. While many that were rich and many that had high status wondered why they actually had to care about others, why it's important to be a steward for others in the land. The Guru reminded that it's only the ego that comes in the way in terms of creating that connection with land and others. And at 5 years old, the Guru had that immense wisdom. And I draw inspiration from that because it reminds me that wisdom is absolutely timeless. Another concept that comes up to me that I really connect with as I think of my own environmental journey is this idea of eternal optimism. So in Punjabi, it's called Chardi Kala. So you can all say eternal optimism. I don't expect you to learn Chardi Kala, but when we think of eternal optimism, what it means is in light of what seems like might not work out, in light of a struggle that seems insurmountable, we must fight, not only for ourselves, but also for our others, because we, once again, are inextricably connected to those that are around us. And the last concept that really relates to that is the idea that there is no enemy. There's a lot of wisdom that I, again, draw a lot of inspiration from in the battlefields in the Sikh faith. As, you know, there are many stories of when Sikh leaders were fighting for land and defending land against invaders. What would actually often happen is on the battlefield, Sikh soldiers to those that were dying from the other army, they would actually give them water as they were dying. And so many question that, why are you giving water to the enemy? But in the eyes of God and in the eyes of the universe, there is no enemy. Recognizing that in the context of our fights, in our fights against the climate crisis, but also the injustice that surrounds the climate crisis, around the emotions that surround the climate crisis. It's critical to recognize that there is no enemy because there is only one. And the one is all of us. It's the environment. And we're all inextricably connected. And as I think of my own journey of connection to lands, connection to people, it's a reminder that I'm the same as everyone here. And the wisdom that others can bring, I can incorporate that into my own life and use it to create differences where I see it fit, and to connect with others and create the world that we want to see. That's the idea of break the divide. And it's an idea that I hold very dearly. So I really appreciate everyone here today, and I appreciate the time. I'm really looking forward to this panel discussion that's to come soon.
Thank you so much, Abe. And finally, I'll turn things over to Kate.
Thanks so much, Charlie, and thank you, Steve, for inviting me to be part of this wonderful gathering. I'm feeling so nourished already and inspired by what I've been hearing in people's stories. Just one quick question. Am I able to screen share? Are you able to help me with that? I don't have to, but
Yes,
while
she's
you're
just
doing,
setting you up, Kate.
thanks. Thanks, great. I realized, I think it was as Ron was introducing himself, that I should have included in my bio that I've been an organic gardener my entire adult life, and was raised on good organic veggies from my parents' garden from the beginning. And that really, I feel the garden and the wild have been my teachers from the beginning. And then I, looking at my little Zoom square, and I realized that behind me is the wild meadow where I spent a lot of time and picking wild strawberries in my childhood, and painted by my dad in 1965, that painting. And and Ron's story reminded me that, or not only Ron's, but Coyote's as well, and that really it's our birthright as little children to feel our connection with the more than human world. And I do remember being a little girl out in that field, looking out over the forest and the valley, and realizing, you know what, I don't think God is some guy with a long beard out there somewhere in the clouds. This is one big mind, and this is the big mind of God all around me. And I really kind of got that. Maybe I couldn't have articulated it, as a little girl, but I knew it. And that is our birthright, I think. So, when I encountered the teachings of Buddhism, they already sounded familiar. And I don't know how much folks know about the Buddhist tradition, but what I'd like to share some of what has supported me in what I feel is developing and maintaining right relationship with the environment, with the plant, animal, and elemental realms on which our lives completely depend. So first, two fundamental teachings of Buddhism: one, impermanence, and two, no separate self. And what those mean is that everything in the universe exists only in dynamic interrelationship with everything else throughout space and time. And when we deeply see this reality, we understand that our well-being is not separate from the well-being of others, and not only human beings, but ecosystems, forests, oceans, mountains, deserts. There's an image. Okay, and here I'm going to screen share. Sorry. There's an image from ancient India that represents this reality, and it's called Indra's net. Indra's net is described as the vast, infinite net with a jewel at each node or intersection that reflects every other jewel. It's kind of a holographic universe. And this image that I'm showing you is from the website of an organization called One Earth Sangha. Sangha means community. And the One Earth Sangha promotes engagement with environmental issues from the perspective of Buddhist praxis. As we already have heard, this is not, this understanding of interconnection is not unique to Buddhism. It's common to many traditions, particularly traditions that are close to the earth, the teachings of the earth. So another teaching that to me supports not only environmental awareness, but response is the Eightfold Path. And again, I'm going to show you an image. Whoops. Sorry, I think. Are you seeing this image? No, I think not. Let
No,
me.
we're not seeing it, Kate.
Sorry. Now you are.
There we go. Good.
Now you are. So the Eightfold Path to liberation from suffering is often represented as an eight-spoked wheel, and each spoke supports all the others. So the spokes of right view and right intention are how we orient our mind. Right action, right speech, and right livelihood are how we take our practice into daily life. And right effort, right concentration, and right mindfulness are the components of meditation practice that support the other spokes of the wheel. So people who come to our Zen Center in Vancouver often want to learn how to meditate so they can cope with stress and anxiety, if you have a more peaceful life. But after they practice for a while, they begin to discover a deeper sense of anguish, to get in touch with a deeper sense of sort of pervasive dissatisfaction. And they also discover that meditation alone is not the answer. That whole wheel, all those practices together are necessary and that extend to every aspect of our lives. So, right speech, right action, right livelihood are all supported by our spiritual practice, by our practice of awareness. And we also learn as we practice that everything we say or don't say, everything we do or don't do makes a difference, however small, and flows onward and outward in ways that we may never know, for good or harm, or most often some mixture of good and harm, because even our best intentions are sometimes contaminated by our questionable motivations, our self-centered motivations. So this is the law of karma, cause and effect. Whether or not we ascribe to a doctrine of reincarnation, we make a strong intention, we make a vow to awaken and live a life of non-harming, a life of benefit to others, not just ourselves, not just me and mine, us and ours. So as Buddhism moved along the trade routes in ancient times from northern India into other countries, it was both changed by those cultures and changed those cultures. So in China, it was influenced by Taoist thought, which stressed harmony with the cycles of nature. And in Japan, it was influenced by indigenous Shinto practices, which revered the spirits of trees and waterfalls, rivers and mountains. The 13th century Japanese Zen master Dogen wrote a text called the Mountains and Waters Sutra. The sutra usually refers to the early teachings of the Buddha, so it might seem strange to call 13th century text a sutra. But Dogen wasn't writing a sutra about mountains and waters. He was saying that mountains and waters are a sutra, that they are teaching us about the nature of existence without any words, right? That's how little children get the message. And the opening line of that sutra is, mountains and waters right now actualize the ancient Buddha expression. And so, of course, not only mountains and waters, but red cedars, sword ferns, the bears, the raccoons. Just the other day, I saw the first salmonberry blooms opening. And I thought, okay, the rufous hummingbirds will be here. And just an hour later, I saw the first rufous hummingbird. So one way Buddhism is evolving in the West is through engagement in social justice and environmental activism. And at our center, we have an engaged practice committee, and they put out a newsletter giving information and resources about ways to take action and ways to speak out and address climate change and other environmental and social issues. And we've discussed what Buddhist practice offers in support of that kind of engagement and activism. And we talked about how it's the capacity to take a very wide, deep view and at the very same time see the particular, like what's needed right now. A monk once asked Zen Master Yunmen, "What is the work of a Buddha's whole life?" And Yunmen answered, "An appropriate response. Relationship." So I don't think any of these perspectives are unique to Buddhism. We're seeing lots of crossover just in this conversation here. And I don't think that countries that are predominantly Buddhist can claim any better environmental track record than any others, especially in modern times. But for me, what Buddhist practice has offered is a kind of scaffolding of practice that supports a mindful and ethical approach to activism that doesn't feed that mind of polarization and enmity that's so common in our society right now, and that uses language with care from a place of wisdom and compassion. I'm going to show you one more picture, if I may. Some of you may have seen yes. Some of you may have seen images like this of, this is in Chinese Kuan-Yin or in Japanese Kannon, the Bodhisattva of compassion with 1,000 arms and hands. And a Bodhisattva, Bodhi means awakening and Sattva means being. So a Bodhisattva is a kind of archetypal being who is awakened, but vows to live in the world and help others to awaken and be freed from suffering. And each of Kannon Bodhisattva's hands has an eye in the palm of the hand to see a particular suffering being, and a tool, holds a tool in each hand to respond to that being. So I mentioned the One Earth Sangha before, and they've coined a word, ecosattva. So an ecologically active bodhisattva. And they have trainings for those who want to apply Buddhist perspectives to environmental activism. And we've hosted several of those trainings in the past few years. But this image of the 1,000-armed bodhisattva really helps me when I'm feeling discouraged, when I'm feeling like I'm not doing enough in the face of so much suffering in the world. So I make a special effort to read about, learn about, support, and share stories of the courageous work being done, right, all over the world, at grassroots and international levels, so many different ways. As just one of those 1,000 hands, infinite hands, I take inspiration from what all those other hands are doing, knowing that we are parts of one body. So I will take some inspiration from each of you who have spoken tonight, from your hand and your set of tools as we continue to do the good work of healing this earth. And I just want to share a verse in closing from a text called the Flower Garland Sutra. Why should we cherish all sentient beings? Because sentient beings are the roots of the trees of awakening. The bodhisattvas and Buddhas are the flowers and fruits. Compassion is the water for the roots. So I also want to let you know that I'm speaking to you from the traditional and unceded lands of the Stolo Nation, and in holding a lot of gratitude to that nation as keepers of the river. So thank you everyone for your attention.
Thank you so much, Kate, and please join me in thanking all of the panelists. for their spectacular presentations. We have a little bit of time past 8:30 if we need it, and so what I'll do now, Steve and Bruce, if you think this is the way to go, is we'll do a short round of questions amongst the panelists, and then go to the audience. So that sounds right. Okay, great. So yeah, I'll now sort of step back and allow. I'm here to moderate if things get ugly, but otherwise I'll let the five of you to talk about what you've just shared and what you've heard.
Well, I'm just, I'm just basking in all of this beautiful sharing and language and story, and feel, as Kate said, very nurtured by it. So thank you very much. I just have one curious question, and it's for Abe, if I may. Laurel presented the, kind of the bookends of the tree in the Hebrew and Christian scriptures, and how she is sort of, a beautiful presentation of how she works with that in her craft. And I know from Coyote, we heard some beautiful teachings and experiences, and we've heard of the importance of trees in Indigenous tradition, the cedar, especially on the coast here in ceremony. The Buddha was enlightened under a Bodhi tree, and the prayer that you finished with, or the wisdom, had a tree. Does the tree figure in Sikhism at all? Is there an image? Does that? I'm curious if you have an example for us.
Yeah, I know, that's a wonderful question. That's, I love seeing these links. It's so powerful talking about those links. I would say the biggest thing that comes to my mind is just stories of the Sikh gurus speaking under trees, and thinking of the land of Punjab in India, right? This is again a very healthy natural environment, and so there's nature everywhere. And one of the things actually that's very fascinating is in Sikh history, upon the time of Sikhs being persecuted by others, many Sikhs actually lived in jungles. And so if you can think of, again, Sikhs have uncut hair. So taking care of uncut hair in the jungle was a practice that was actually established. But one of the things that helped with that is all the water that was available all the time. So like there's that connection between trees on one end because of you're living in the jungles for long periods of time, but then there's the rivers that help you in taking care of long hair, taking care of both your physical and spiritual health. So I think trees are one of those things that shows up quite a few times, but it's really just, like that embodiment of the nature that is everywhere and the nature that is the connection to oneness.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was struck by that unique sense of relationship between people and our stories and our traditions. It's like it's a living relationship between that and planet and rocks and water and things that you would think of as inanimate objects, but in fact contain a deep spirit that connects with us in deeply unique and special spiritual ways.
Yeah, and I'll draw your attention to those of you in the audience tonight. As Bruce has just let you know in the chat, you can also put questions to the panelists either individually or as a group in the chat as well. If I know it can be a little bit intimidating to take on the spotlight in a Zoom scenario, and the chat box might be an easier way to pose those questions as well.
Abby has raised his hand. Let's hear from Abby first.
Yeah, just a quick question to Kate, actually. Kate, I was just reflecting on, again, your mention of ego and, in Buddhist philosophy, the disconnection from self, but connection to everything that is relational. I wonder, in the context of a big systemic issue like climate change, how that sort of wisdom can actually help in achieving agency and allowing people to feel like they can take action.
I would say, often people come to practice and they think it's about, oh, I have to get rid of my ego. And that's not exactly it. It's seeing the nature of self, which is always in relationship. And that can actually be empowering, because if we think it's all about us, we can be paralyzed. But if we really understand that we are in relationship, we can, and that what we do and say matters, we can join with others and not be afraid. There's a lot more we could talk about in that regard, but for now.
Charlie, Rhonda has her hand up. Shall we hear from Rhonda?
Yeah, sounds good. Sorry, yes, I forgot. Yeah, there's also the reactions button. So in addition to the chat box, you can raise your hand that way. And Bruce will see you. I won't, but he'll let me know. So thanks. Rhonda, please.
Sure. I think Michelle might have had her hand up first. Does it matter?
Rhonda, we
Okay.
can't hear you very well.
Oh, okay. I know
We-
why. It's this. Sorry.
No,
You know?
can't hear you at all now. While you're getting set up, can we hear from Michelle?
Thank you. I really appreciate everybody contribution, particularly all of the connections that you have with our world. I just before this have been in contact with Lead Now, and I was trying to convince a lot of people that in fact I belong to about 7 or 8 groups, and we've been working on climate change and items like that for a very, very long time. Just prior to this particular conversation, I was working with people trying to get them to realize that the RBC, for instance, has put in billions and billions of dollars into the oil sands and into various things of that sort. Same thing with the TD Bank. We've been working like this with all of these groups that I'm in. We've been working like this for I can't even remember how many years I've been on these various projects. So I guess my question to you is, to each one of you, I think you have definitely put your hearts into it, but I'm wondering, where is the action? I'm into action, and as I've just explained, and I'd like to know, where is the action? And for instance, you could all work together and do something really positive. But I'm really starting to feel now that all the years and years that I've put into this, we're not getting anywhere. So I hope that you will have answers for me that will give me a little bit more of a positive scope on this. Anyone?
So the slow movement is slow, but it's about taking our time and recognizing the local resources and the value of local makers and sourcing things locally, rather than putting a lot of effort and energy and attention on drawing in resources and materials that we would like from a far distance, thereby creating a large carbon footprint. There are a lot of people that are very happy to make custom things at reasonable costs, so that we're not relying on things like Amazon and some big carbon footprint corporations and organizations. to provide us with the resources that we enjoy. So I know local farming is a slow movement, local clothing makers, it's slow clothing. It's recognizing and valuing people that are doing this kind of work and supporting them.
Thank you. I noticed particularly with what I'm just looking, the Buddhist lady who I've forgotten the name, and the action and speech and seems to have been a focus for you. Now, what was your group doing in the way of action?
Well, it's a continuous process of soul searching and questioning how can we be most effective? How can we reach out to, because we've got a committee who then reaches out to the wider congregation, and how to do that. And definitely looking, there was a big, we were encouraging people to make their wishes known to Canada Pension, to disinvest in the big banks and fossil fuels, and likewise the banks that you mentioned, to look at where where our money is being used. So we try and target different themes sometimes in the newsletter, and then let people know certain actions that are happening, so that people can come together and and even in small groups to participate, so that they're not so much alone. And of course, there's lots of organizations that are we each choose what we can do, because we can't all do everything, much as we wish we could.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll offer just a briefly, in the Anglican world right now, there's this tremendous beginnings, at least, I would say, of responding to the climate crisis, some resources being put there. We've gone through a process of declaring a climate emergency, and now identifying, a number of concrete actions that are range from sort of political advocacy work, policy work, to civil disobedience for those who so choose, to support at the parish level for greening of, church buildings, lots of different levels. And I think, all faith traditions that I'm aware of have some sort of response right now to the, the existential threat that we're all facing, and that's really suitable. For me, there's another role that's really, really important for faith communities in this time, and that is we sort of experience this unraveling, this, lit and burned to the ground, and we saw what happened in the Fraser Valley. I think the sort of response of faith communities to respond to the human need, the sort of pastoral side of this, is really, really important, because we're entering a very uncertain and difficult time. And I think faith communities have facilities, we have a sensitivity around the human experience of crisis. And for me, that's another place that we need to be paying attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Just while we're looking, is there anyone here at the church hall who would like to ask a question? Yeah, I'm going to have to get up, Hardy, and come here. But before you do, no, it's okay. We can't use those. Rhonda has put her question in the chat, and I'll read it out so that you can all hear it as well as read it. Rhonda says, my question is about the dualism that Ron spoke of in Western Christianity. So much of what I have heard from other wisdoms seems to have more awareness of a relationship to the non-human world. I think Laurel may have mentioned Eastern Christian traditions having a closer relationship to the earth. how can we bring this awareness back into our worship and our awareness? If we could mobilize the church, it might go a long way in influencing our politicians in the climate crisis.
That's a really big question. Thank you for asking that. I think it has to do with having the will to do it. We might argue that churches are filled with people that follow the old dog, new tricks philosophy, but COVID and Zoom has proven that we are capable of learning how to do new things and using new technology, and we can get good at it too, because there was a will to maintain community and worship online and Bible studies and whatever else. If we really want to do this, we will find a way. But articulating that well is tricky, because it can be really hard to imagine what that looks like. So personally, I think I'm a firm believer in models. And if you can create a diorama of what a truly future-focused, sustainability-focused church can look like, that might actually give people a sense of, oh, we can do this after all.
I just want to add that I am really encouraged that younger people are coming to our center who recognize that that they need spiritual practice to have the strength and resilience to do the work that they want to do in the world, whether they're artists, or activists, or lawyers, human rights lawyers, and they're so just smart and articulate, and they're just out ahead of where I was at their age, and it gives me a lot of hope. And Abe is a good example of that for us.
Charlie, we have Hardy here now at St. Hilda's to ask a question.
Terrific, thank you.
Well, it's actually not a question, it's a comment. But anyways, just to give you my background, I started my career with Imperial Oil. So I'm an oil man. I'm kind of the enemy here. I have some faith that we're going to solve these problems. I have a cousin who has worked on a model that allows for electricity production from the sun. So where you shift a lot of electricity around from the southern hemispheres to the northern hemispheres, depending on wherever their most sun is. Okay, so they can shift a huge amount of electricity through big copper pipes and stuff like that. So he's working on those models. So there's some hope in that area that we can do away with a lot of this carbon footprinting and get more into electrical use of electricity. But anyways, the comment I was going to make, and maybe my question's going to follow on that, is there was a little article, and do I see myself here at all? No, I know you're right there. Oh, hi there. Okay. Another comment I was going to make, there was a little something either in the news or it was on I picked it up on the web somewhere, but they were talking about the temperatures at the poles that were measured 3 or 4 days ago. And the pole temperatures were between 30 to, I think it was 50 degrees Celsius above normal, both the North Pole and the South Pole. And the South Pole, I think, was something like 60, 70 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. The South Pole this time of year is normally about 50 below Fahrenheit. It was just at freezing. The North Pole was at 12 degrees above Fahrenheit. So folks, we got a problem, and it's all nice to talk and think and do all that kind of good stuff. But I think the time for action is seriously coming. I don't really have a question. Okay, thank you, Harvey.
They won't be able to hear you. Here we go.
Yes, my spouse asked, what are we going to do about it, husband? So what we're doing about it personally is we're living in a house that is totally electrically heated, and we're paying a very high price for that because the way the BC hydro structure is structured, that after 666 kilowatt hours, which I get to in about 5 or 6 days, heating my place at 10 below, when it's cold outside, I hit that. And then my price goes up 50%. And I mean, everything goes up because I heat my water electrically. I run everything electrically except we have a gas stove to cook, okay? And the other thing we do is we run a car. We have 2 cars, and we have one that's a little bit of a gas burner. It burns exotic super fuel and stuff. And we don't run that one right now. We run another one. It's a little Echo. It's got a little 15cc banger, and it runs forever on a gallon of gas. You know, and if everybody did that, we wouldn't have this problem right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
People who ignore the environment do it because they want to make a lot of money.
Anne is commenting that it's all about money, and that it's kind of the way our world works, that money drives the bus. Yeah. Yeah. Abby, shall we hear from you? I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to address that point right there. I think, you know, I think as people, and, you know, in today's day and age, when we think of climate change, it can be very easy to become all consumed with our individual action. And while individual action is critical, I think combining that with the collective action that we know can actually create the solutions that we need. And so I think in the context of what we do in your community, do you own a business, or do you know people that own businesses? I'm sure you know at least one person that owns a business, small or big. How are they mitigating their carbon emissions? How is your city mitigating carbon emissions? Have you talked to your city planner about the sorts of urban planning that might need to be done? Or have you talked about adaptation to the next extreme weather event that impacts your community? Again, I think even as it comes to spirituality and faith circles, what is the carbon emission of the church? How do you engage in activities where people are doing so in a way that is equitable? Like, what is the impact of your use of the land on the displacement of people that are original inhabitants of the land? And how do you invite new people to the conversations? I think those are the questions that are a lot more valuable to be asking, because, you know, I think we can often get ourselves feeling good about ourselves. And I think it's important to feel good about yourself when you are doing good work. But I think the buck doesn't stop at your individual action. I think that's where it starts. And even if you can't do the individual action, because that's difficult, I think you can definitely work with others in your community and start those conversations, and not just stop at conversation, no, take those conversations to the places where it matters. Because again, looking at the Zoom room around us, I think a lot of the folks in this room hold a lot of power. And I think using that power, recognizing where that power can be used, is critical.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abe. And maybe as we come to the end of our time here together, I'll ask if any of the other panelists or any of the panelists has any sort of final thoughts that they would like to leave us with, or that they'd like to respond to the conversation in general, or. Yeah.
I'd like to just share some wisdom that I'm aware of from another Buddhist, and that's Joanna Macy, who I imagine, Kate, you're familiar with, and others are too. And in, I think her book, The Great Turning, you know, all these problems are so complex, and there's so many different levels, as Abe just made a really good observation of. But I really like how she says there's sort of 3 levels we need to be working on. The first one is stopping the further damage, that's like, loss of biodiversity and further contamination, more carbon emissions, etc. But that alone is not enough. We have to create the second step is we have to create living examples or models of how to do things differently as communities, as institutions, as individuals, all of those levels. But that too isn't quite enough. And the third is, again, where I think our faith communities can have quite a bit of impact, and that is that we need to do the work of looking at how we got here in the first place. What are those sorts of cultural patterns, beliefs, those structures that brought us to this point? And we need to work to transform those too. And those are questions of sort of how we see existence and how we see our relationship to everything else. And it's, they're very theological at the end of the day, theological questions. So I like that framing of it and appreciate Joanna's work so much.
Thank you, Ron. Anyone else? If not, I'd ask you all to join me in once again thanking all of our panelists tonight. It was really a remarkable event. I'm so happy to have been able to be involved. And I'll invite you all to next week's session, which will be same time, same place. Is that correct, Steve? And the topic next week is
human place, wisdom and the human place in the universe.
Wisdom and the human place in the universe.
Oh, wisdom in the human place in the universe. Okay, so
it's a small topic.
Yeah. Well, I think we've established that the human place in the universe is right here on Zoom, where it just all seems to flow. So once more, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all of you for being here. Bruce and Steve, thanks so much for convening such an edifying and inspiring talk. And blessings to everyone. Thanks for being here.
Okay. Thanks. Bye now.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.